Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to the Emotional Intelligence as a Muslim workshop. I want to firstly just apologize to you guys. I have tried to record on my mic and my mic is failing me. I've done it twice. So there is poor audio in this and I just wanted to apologize in advance, but at least I can communicate something across and we can get it done. I think that's the main point here. So we're going to be addressing basically that concept that we see in our faith of the pious predecessors going through these really hard times, yet subhanAllah still coming out really, really composed and coming from a regulated place. So emotional regulation is where you genuinely feel calm and resolved about a matter and you're able to put down boundaries or hear someone say unkind things to you and you are not taking it personally. You are not reacting. You don't feel intimidated to approach someone and kindly put down a boundary or ask them what they meant when they said something unkind. Like you are really resolved. You know what your rights are, your needs are, and you calmly put those rights and needs down and you're not conflicted inside. So we definitely see the Prophet ﷺ doing this. And I gave in my talk the example of him going to Taif. He was very much on purpose of why he needed to go to Taif, even though he was stoned by kids and he was bleeding. When he was offered that the town be basically put to death, he declined. He declined because he said, well, you know what? One of them could become a Muslim. So he was very much, again, on purpose and on point and didn't function from reactivity, didn't function from revenge or retaliation. It was just purely his purpose, did his bit, and then asserted a boundary and stepped out. And even in his interactions with Wahshi, the slave man who had killed his uncle when he had turned Muslim, the Prophet ﷺ loved his uncle. Being an orphan, he only had a few uncles that were loving and kind to him and parental figures. And this uncle was very, very supportive, Hamza, radiallahu anhu. And so to have that uncle being killed, the boundary that we see that is healthy and normal that we see the Prophet ﷺ put through is that when Wahshi would come into a room and pray, the Prophet would not come so close to him. So he had some sort of a boundary, some sort of a distance away. And I'm not saying that so you cut ties. He did not cut ties, but he had a distance with people that had harmed him. And in the same way, we see this with Maryam alayhi salam, like when she was in a vulnerable time and she was going through her pregnancy and people were assuming things about her. She didn't let herself hear that commentary. She actually left the town that she grew up in, the only place she knew as a young girl. She left and she put down that boundary. So subhanAllah, we do see that happen. And it is called emotional regulation, where you can feel the feelings, which is normal and human, but you're not acting out of that feeling. You're not acting out of anger, hurt. You're not acting out of negativity. You're not showcasing all that sadness. You are appropriately taking emotional responsibility. So what typically does happen is something called emotional dysregulation. So there's emotional regulation where you learn, usually from your parents, how to regulate your emotions. And usually in childhood, we kind of come out emotionally dysregulated. You see this very much showcased in that concept called the terrible twos, where the child is feeling a whole lot of intensity. And that intensity is very much showcased in everything that they're doing. They'll show extreme anger, extreme hurt, extreme sadness, extremes of emotions. And when they do that, they also expect that you fix it for them. So whatever's gone on, whatever expectations they have, they expect and assume that you should fix it up for them, and they don't want to take responsibility. And in that process, we are meant to show them how to take responsibility, and we're also meant to validate them. So we're not meant to shut down their emotion and say, you shouldn't feel that, that's not right, you don't need to be angry. We can allow the emotion, so validate the emotion, but then put down a boundary or suggest a responsibility. Like if so-and-so is doing such and such, maybe you can remove yourself from the room. Maybe you could do this, or maybe you can do that. And it's a similar thing with us. So that is basically the premise of learning how to emotionally regulate. It's acknowledging the feeling and then taking some sort of action. But we're now dealing with us, and typically we've been raised in a way where our parents and grandparents, when they were shown dysregulated behavior, what they were taught to do and what was probably done upon them was shut it down. And the way it was shut down actually causes a trauma. So the way they shut it down was by dismissing it very typically getting physically and verbally abusive. Like, we can call it other things. Some people don't like me saying that, but it is that. It's either doing a character assassination of the child, telling them they're bad or they're a bad kid or they're terrible, or name calling, or physically hitting them. Like, men usually say they get hit like an object, or even being hit in general. You're getting intimidated due to a normal emotional response that Allah actually has given you. And we will go into what you're meant to do with those emotional responses and what does it mean. But today we're going to just stick to emotional dysregulation. So we're coming from that background that we're either hit verbally or physically, like abused. We're being showcased fear-induced parenting. So they're eliciting some sort of fear within us, some sort of guilt within us, some sort of shame or intimidation. And what that does, it just shuts down the dysregulated behavior just out of fear and intimidation. It doesn't actually resolve it. So what happens is the child or the person just learns that, oh, I better not show my feelings to this person or that person. And then they try to find ways to manage their emotions. And this is where it gets quite sad. Like, sometimes they will manage it through like OCD traits, through addictions, through addictive habits and patterns, through stuff like overeating as well. Overeating, undereating, over shopping, drugs, and other sorts of things. Over cleaning, becoming a perfectionist. So they start trying to find ways to cope because they are human and they're meant to feel the emotions, but it's not safe to feel it. So they suppress it. And the nervous system goes into some typical responses. These typical responses you may have heard before, and these are involuntary nervous system responses. And just imagine different animals doing this. So one is fight. And you can just like imagine, like, when a lion is intimidated, it's going to come in and it's going to fight. Flight, like a bird fleeing. Freezing. So with freezers, we can call them like emotionally avoidant. Like, they actually don't feel much because the situation was so big that the body shut down, and it's called dissociation. They're almost like dissociated and they don't feel much. And when it's safer, maybe even years later or months later, that's when they'll actually feel the emotion behind it. But sometimes it's a lifetime later. Sometimes they've been raised intimidation or with big things gone wrong or big needs not met. And so they're in a shutdown response. And the reason why I'm harping on it, it's very typically something that males may actually shut down quite a lot. And then when they are in a situation where they're not intimidated, like perhaps with their wife, they might have a bit of an explosion because it's safe to, or they may not. They might just have to actually get emotionally stay shut down. And that's where like women may complain, oh, he doesn't open up, or he's just going and doing all those other things. So he might find it really, really hard to problem solve through conflict, to hear emotion. And it's because he wasn't shown what to do. And when he was showing some emotion, he was quite brutally like shut down. And so that causes all sorts of complications. So fight, flight, freeze, and please. So pleasing is something that women typically do. And you could actually have bits of all of this in different areas of your life. So what I'm going to encourage you to do is to have a look. Where in your life do you end up fighting? Do you end up getting reactive or passive aggressive or like snappy? And is it usually with the people that you're less intimidated by? And what needs were not met, or what got overwhelming that caused you to get into your fight response? Do that one for fight. And then for flight, what scenarios or what people do you feel like you just need to flee from? And for me, kind of raised in a way where you just need to be obedient to elders. And I'd noticed that I could not meet my needs around elders. I was told it was bad too. So it's the own belief system I held or I took on. And so I'd get into some avoidance. So I might be agreeable there because it's the right thing to do. And yes, this sounds very inauthentic of me. And then I'd like flee, like basically not genuinely say, this is my issue and this is what I have to do. So it kind of causes an ingenuine relationship where you're kind of in avoidance and you can't do it, but you're kind of just there being agreeable. So there's a bit of people pleasing going on and a bit of a like flight response where you're not really connecting. You're not really being authentic. Freezing. Where do you freeze? Where is it too intimidating? Think of something like people going through a death of a family member. Sometimes people say, I functioned so well, but then like 6 months later, they come crashing down. Or they might have watched their parents go through a really terrible relationship and then they only start feeling it all in their 20s. So that just means that your body was like shutting down when that was happening. And now that it's safe, you're feeling it all. So you had a frozen response before and now it's all coming out. asking yourself, where in my life has that happened? It can happen through divorce as well. When you have to do a lot through a divorce, you're going through a lot, you might still feel something, but you're not feeling the array of it. And then like maybe 6 months later, 2 years later, 3 years later, you start feeling all of it. So that's why it's really, really important to understand, what do we need to stay emotionally healthy and emotionally intelligent. So when we're noticing that we're going through something, we can actually give ourselves the grace and we can understand ourselves better. The last one is a pleasing response. So where do you feel like you're having to be a people pleaser, and what belief systems do you have that are keeping that people pleaser alive? Do you believe like, I must kind of say yes at all times to these certain people, or with family I can't not be there? So where are there some judgments? I would call it like intimidations that you're holding towards your own behavior, like feeling intimidated that if I spoke up or if I said no, like how are people going to judge me? Because that's you taking on someone else's belief system. People can demand and command things, but we ultimately need to learn how to put that assertion down. And when it's not new for us, our nervous system is going to react in these ways. We're going to feel anxious. We're going to feel like the fight, flight, freeze, or please response come in. We're going to feel uncomfortable. So write them down and write down what you could do, and or what could you say to have your needs met. And I want to go slightly into the needs as well. The needs are a need for basic emotional, physical, and psychological security, a need for connection, a need for also things to be progressing and growing in some sort of way. When there's stagnation, it is quite depressing for humans. A need for some sort of importance. You've got meaning in your life that you're doing something important, and a need for growth. So checking to see, do I have that in all domains of my life in terms of spiritually, emotionally, and physically? And if I don't, where can I add that in? Where can I add more certainty? And what is uncertain? And what isn't stable? What feels disconnected? And where am I not progressing or growing? Where do I not hold any meaning? And if you go into those bits, write down what you could possibly do to attain those things, and let me know how you feel. Comment in any of the socials, and inshallah, I will interact with you. And any hiccups, let me know, and we can get through this. It's quite deep work and it can be confusing. So if there is any confusions at all, do reach out. I hope this was helpful. I can't wait to do the next segment, and inshallah, we'll be in touch. Assalamu alaikum.